Hey guys, so we're going to go over subdivision modeling with a weighted bevel. We're just going to set the modifier up first. I think it's the easiest way to get started with this, but basically change segment counts to 2, profile to 1. We'll come back here and change some of this other stuff later, but we'll clamp overlap off, change it to width if you want. That's optional, and use arc on the outer emitter. For the most part, we're set up here, but basically when you turn clamp overlap off, it allows us to take the width and set it very high if we wanted to. So if I want to set it to something like 4, this is fine because we're going to be using weights, not angle base. And when we do this, we're going to go ahead and have our modifier set up now. We're going to add a subdivision, turn it off in edit mode, and just use a level 1 for now. So we'll use that later on to add these modifiers to other objects. But basically, you can start modeling. And so this works best when you're using this on edge loops or things you want to turn into edge loops. Otherwise, it gets a little finicky. So basically, you can start modeling. Anytime you run across an edge, you want to add a bevel weight to it. You can press N, bring out side panel. You can use this. Now we can't see what's going on here. You want to make sure that wireframe here, you right click this and add a shortcut for it. So you can turn it on and off as needed. All right. So you want to be able to see what's going on here. And also, we want to copy that modifier to this object too. So Control L, oh, we select this, Shift select this, Control L, copy modifiers, and we're done there. Okay, so now when we have this going, we can actually see our wireframes. We can change the bevel weights here and do things like that. And we can actually create a little bevel here. These are called Korean bevels, by the way, little flat bevels like that. So basically, if you want to bump up the subdivision count, you can, but a lot of times you're going to apply this later on. So it's probably better to just leave it kind of simple at 1 or 2 maybe. And if we want as well, we can come up to edge in edit mode. And usually we have Shift E's edge crease, but you can change edge bevel weight, right click it, change the shortcut, use Shift Control E, and now you can do your edge bevel weights this way as well. It's quite good. And so as you're working and you're trying to create your object, there's just certain times you're going to want to create bevels, and this is the way you do it. You can also hover over this field, hit Control C, select your other edge, and hit Control V as you hover over it. And you can copy the values around. So this can be kind of good because we can do this in a number of different areas, perhaps, and start beveling as we're working. Now the problem is like I was saying, you need to use this mostly on loops because when you have things dead end like this and they don't have to continue the bevel weight, it gets a little squirrely. All right. So you probably want to make sure it's on a loop or surrounding the whole object at least. So what I mean by that is maybe something like we're working this shape. I'm going to symmetrize it using Mesh Machine real quick and Control F and grid fill. Oops, it's not going to grid fill, I guess. Let's try loop cut down the middle. Turn remove redundant center off with Mesh Machine or Mesh Machine's symmetrize feature there. So we'll do a grid fill across this. Okay, and so you can see if this is a loop all the way through. We'll use we'll set it to 0 real quick and we'll just reset it. But something like this over here, we might want to do a boundary selection. So select loops boundary loop. So you can imagine this is going to be something like a loop. So we can do this right here at this corner. You can see where they're kind of fighting with each other a little bit, like the two different bevel weights. That's another thing that'll happen. Sometimes you want to match them a little bit closer. You can fluctuate these a little bit, but can't always get away with it. But you can see that actually works out pretty well here in this area. So if we were to go down and try taking this all the way to the back here, you can see we can also do that like so. So there's some rare instances like these edges, you can still use them on them to hold them a little bit, right? But that's not going to be as common as you think. You'll find that it actually causes a lot of problems as you go throughout the process later on, but it could be useful at first. Just grid fill that, boundary select. So select loops, boundary loops, put it on a hotkey. It's useful. Find a lot of times that you may use that one. You can see how they always want to kind of work at the same resolutions too. But you can do this. But the problem is sometimes you'll end up with like the triangle here. This could be a quad. When it subdivides, it still turns into quad basically. So there's little weird oddities like that that happen sometimes, but they can be a little bit A little bit weird at first if you're not used to doing that. So we'll shade all that smooth. And there we go. So we got our subdivision shape going now at least. And when you want to try changing something's values, you can see you can run into a little bit of a problem with it doing this. It's not as good as you probably were hoping it would be. So the main thing here to take away is that even though you can use these kind of non-destructive bevels now, you're still going to do things like chamfers or manual bevels, perhaps. Specifically when things are larger, I think it works out well. But it's something you want to keep in mind, okay? That you're not always going to get away with using this setup like this. Sometimes you will have to go through and just do it manually still. And because we did it manually, we'll have to possibly do some knife cuts, do some redirects maybe. And this is possibly going to go hayward here in this corner, maybe. Nope, no, I didn't do too bad. All right. So you do want to check your kind of edge flow out. This is the Isoline display. So this is technically your edge flow, but if you ever want to turn subdivision optimal display off, this can also be useful. So I get an idea of what needs to happen and occur over here. So we'll do a redirect from that corner across. I'll take that one all the way over. You see those wireframes can also become very disorienting. So sometimes you do want to turn them off because it's not really edges you can work with or vertices, right? So sometimes it'll just be like, why can't I click this thing? Nope, can't click that thing because it's not the way it's set up. You can also sometimes get away with still using triangles and whatnot. So if you want to try doing things like that, you could. You need to have a good, firm understanding of subdivision modeling in general. So you'll recognize, things like this is going to collapse here. It's not really a big deal. But if you were to run this all the way through, we'll get basically this kind of thing going, which, maybe isn't the prettiest looking topology, but it does keep you from having that additional kind of weird flow going. So if you want to do things like that, you could as well. And at a certain point, you'll take your model and you'll say, yeah, I want to collapse it later. So it's very easy to work with this now in iterations because all you do is make sure your level one subdivision bevels are on, convert it to a mesh, go into edit mode, remove all your bevel weights, okay, and then take this, shift select that, Control L, copy modifiers, and so you have the same setup again, and you can go through this further. And whenever you want to make your changes, you can do an inset, hold control, loop select this, boundary select it, and then Control Shift E. You could do a number like that. And so a little bit less destructive perhaps. And because this is flat here, we can do a bevel. Not a big deal. Get a nice little shape out of that perhaps. All right, so these ones are kind of set in stone now, but we are able to still utilize the weighted bevels at the same time, which is nice. You'll have to play around with this, get used to it. It's definitely not it's not as simple as it looks. Now, there are some benefits to doing this as well. You have technically less geometry to worry about as you're doing this. Certain times when you're doing certain shape changes, like let's say I do an inset here, screwed this up on Z, and I'll flatten it using machine tools at the top. So a lot of times you would add a loop cut on things like this right here at the top. And then what ends up happening is you'll try to move it all back and you'll see you get like this little stepping effect here where it stays flat straight up and down. And then, so that's annoying because you have to control exit and then add another loop cut. And when you're doing those bevel weights, it's not quite the same. What ends up happening is you do like a boundary select, you do your bevel weight. All this geometry up here is still, you can move it, no problems, and that recalculates that little angle there. Perhaps you add some in the middle though, maybe it wouldn't go so easily, but I think you get the idea. So you can make some pretty interesting shapes rather quickly, and have a little bit of fun with it. You still, you're going to do all your regular subdivision tricks. There's no cheating way of doing subdivision that I know of, anyways. But Yeah, so you might find this useful, you might not. A lot of guys use it. I personally, I don't use it all that much, but I still do occasionally set it up. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll check you out in the next one.